Hi, I'm Sam Cole, and this is A Track Record. Together with Jack Paling, I run Colebrook Partners, an investment firm focused on UK-listed businesses where we've seen just how vital strong leadership really is. In this podcast, we go beyond the CV to explore the real stories of the people behind the companies. A Track Record is designed to give listeners a candid, in-depth look at the personal and professional journeys of those who stepped into the C-suite, as well as the founders and quasi-founders who've built, scaled, and sold their businesses. We talk career paths, pivotal moments, leadership lessons, and how they see the future. Whether you're an investor, a leader, or just curious about what makes businesses tick, we think you'll find something valuable here today. So welcome to A Track Record, where leadership journeys meet the market.
Thanks, Sam. Before we go any further, we just need to let listeners know that Colebrook Partners currently holds a position in Naked Wines for our clients. Additionally, I serve on the board of the company alongside our guest, Rodrigo Maza, and nothing in this podcast should be considered investment advice.
Today's guest is the very first guest on A Track Record. Rodrigo Maza is the CEO of Naked Wines, a listed UK business. He began his career at Grupo Modelo and has worked all over the world. His knowledge on the drinks industry is vast, but understanding how he operates, his leadership style, and more about him, well, should we find out?
Yeah, we should. And I've had the pleasure and privilege of getting to know Maza quite well over the past 18 months or so. We initially bonded over the fact that despite both being at a wine company, neither of us are really wine guys, although I think we're coming to learn to appreciate it. Maza, we've been through a lot over those 18 months, some of which I'm sure we'll touch on later. But before we get to that, tell us about your early life. Where did you grow up?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for the invite. It's an honor to be your first guest. I grew up in Mexico City, born and raised there. Went to school there, university, and worked there for 18 years in Grupo Modelo, the biggest brewer in the country, which was later acquired by AB InBev, the largest brewer in the world. So yeah. A proud Mexican. Yeah, only moved to Europe a bit over 3 years ago.
Great, thank you very much. And now you're in a global CEO role, but was that always your aspiration?
Yes, I mean, I believe in having a big vision, right, that pushes you forward, and being in a position where I could have a big, hopefully positive impact in people's lives has always motivated me. So in a way, yes, this was always an ambition. What I've never had is a very rigid plan as to how to get there, right? What I've prioritized throughout my career is solving hard problems that inevitably leads to a lot of learning. Second, I've prioritized building things. I get a lot of energy from setting organizations up for long-term success and building a legacy. And third, I love to work with people that dream big and that are truly ambitious, because those people push you to grow, right? And hopefully you do the same for them. I think that life is too short to spend over 2/3 of your waking hours doing something that only half excites you, right? So I like to work alongside people that go all in as I do.
When you were a kid, were you a natural leader then? One of the things I've observed about you when we've worked together is that you very quickly command the loyalty of people. And I'd wondered if, when you were a child, did you sort of get selected for leadership roles? Were you prefect at school or anything like that?
No, I was a terrible student all my life. So certainly from an academic standpoint, that wasn't the case. I did have very solid groups and then group of friends throughout mainly my teenage years, and they continue to be my best friends today. I don't think you think of yourself as a leader among your mates, right? But I do have high standards for what friendship means, right? And I've always tried to be the best friend that I can be, right? And to be there for people, not only in the fun times, but be there for them in times of needs. Same as I would do for my family, right? So because I hold myself to that standard, I think my friends do the same for me, right? So in a way that shaped me quite a lot. From a family perspective, I mean, my dad died when I was very young. I was 10 years old, and I have two younger brothers who were 8 and 4 at the time. And I come from a very old school European family of refugees, right? Like both my grandparents were refugees, one from Spain, one from the Czech Republic. So there was a lot of pressure of like, now you need to step up, not only for yourself, but for your family. So I think that shaped me a lot in ways that I can't necessarily explain or verbalize, but I think that certainly shaped me in profound ways.
Sure, yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. That sounds very difficult. You're upbringing in Mexico City. So you went to school there, is that right? And then you went straight into work from school. Did you do postgraduate?
No, I didn't. So I went to university basically because in a way I was forced to, right? Like not only by my mom, who was adamant that I needed to do it, but by my peer group. But as I mentioned, like I was a terrible student. I've always loved learning. I've always read a lot, but there was something about the system, the structure of school that never clicked for me. So the moment I was done with university, I vowed to never engage with formal studies again. And I've kept that promise so far. That doesn't mean, of course, that I've stopped learning. I push myself to learn all the time, whether that's at work, at home. I mean, as a father, you learn so much, right? Every day, reading, listening to podcasts, watching documentaries, watching movies, right? So that's how I learn. That's what works for me. But yeah, like the formal, rigid structure of school, the moment I could be done with it, I embraced that opportunity.
No, that sounds very interesting in terms of the way, a lot of people can relate to not loving school or the educational part, but then getting something they really enjoy and growing in that as they go throughout their career.
Sam can really relate to that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a perpetual student.
I'm quite
going to drag me out of university, but yeah.
But in terms of, you mentioned kind of the difficulty of your dad sadly passing away. Was there somebody in your kind of early careers going through school, university, and then into your kind of early career at Modelo? Did you have somebody who was very influential on you in an early age, whether that's a job point of view, family perspective?
I mean, from my family, within my family, obviously my mom has played a crucial role in my life, right? Like from the moment I was born, but especially after my dad died, she's the pillar of our family. I also relied a lot on my grandparents. So people sometimes say that I'm a boomer, right? Like there's a joke like okay boomer, right? But my comeback is like, no, in many ways I was shaped by the greatest generation, right? Like it was my grandparents that shaped me, and they certainly instilled a lot of values that I hold very dear, right? So hard work being the first of them, right? Like anything you do, you do with quality, right? Like and you take very seriously. So that was certainly their ethos. At work, I mean, my first boss, who's I share a name with, his name is Rodrigo, last name is Santos. My first boss was certainly very influential on me. And I mean, I started working in strategic planning. And I did so because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And strategic planning allowed me to develop projects for every function, every area of Grupo Modelo at the time. So I learned what I liked to do. I also learned what I didn't like to do. And eventually that led me to more of a commercial path. But he always gave me great advice, right? Like focus on learning at this stage, try things, build your toolbox, right? Like even if you don't like a project, you're going to learn something that eventually will come in handy. So yeah, he was my first boss, and I was very lucky. Very, very lucky to have him.
If we could talk a little bit about your time at Modelo, in particular, the takeover by AB InBev. As you know from conversations that we have with people through Naked Wines, AB InBev has an almost mythical reputation in business for some very good things and some slightly more controversial things. What was that like? What was the transition like, and what changed? Yeah, just some details and your experience going from Modelo being independent through to being owned by MBI would be great.
Yeah, no, it was certainly a very big change from a culture perspective, right? So Grupo Modelo, I mean, it was a family-owned business, right? Owned not by one family, it's several, but still, right? The way the company spoke about its employees is that we are a family, right? So it was very much relationship-based. The way the company was built was by people developing relations, like close relations with clients all across Mexico and then internationally. I think that clearly worked very well for decades, but then in the 2000s, the game had shifted, right? And it was very much driven by efficiency. And I think that Modelo had a very strong culture in many ways, but cost management was not a strength. And I think it wasn't a high performance culture. It was a culture that was built around loyalty and patience and doing good job and waiting for your turn. And for me, like when I joined, that wasn't a problem. But as I grew, it eventually did become a problem, right? Because I wanted bigger opportunities. I thought I was ready for them, and yet the structure didn't allow for that to happen. So when AB InBev acquired Grupo Modelo, a lot of people reacted negatively to that and left the company, whether willingly or unwillingly. I saw it as a chance to test a new culture, right? And something that AB InBev spoke a lot about was meritocracy. And that was something that where I was in my career was exactly the message that I wanted to hear. And then I spent 10 years working with AB InBev, and that was certainly my experience, right? Like it was a company that was very willing to give you opportunities that maybe you weren't fully ready for, but they were willing to take chances on people and had a healthy disregard for seniority. Right? It's not that expertise doesn't matter, but it's certainly not everything, right? So they valued ambition. They valued, how can I say it? Like you had to have very clear thinking behind your decisions, right? So let's say you made a decision that didn't work out. As long as you had like very clear rationale as to why you made the decision, that didn't reflect badly on you. Actually, like I had a couple of big failures that I thought at some point, like, maybe this is the time when I get fired, right? And instead I was given even greater responsibilities, right? The rationale was there. So that's something that I valued greatly of my time there. Cost cutting, certainly it's a strength. Cost management, they're experts at the thing. They found a playbook, right? And they not only used it over and over again, right? But fine-tuned it every single time, right? So it was a massive driver of growth for the company. Then the M&A game stopped because basically they got themselves to a position where that wasn't a viable avenue to grow anymore. And now the company is recalibrating around organic growth, right? And it has proven challenging. But in the past few years, I think they found a good footing in evolving their portfolios, presenting their brands in different ways, expanding to no and low alcohol, to adjacent categories. So I think they're going to do quite well in the next few years. I wish them the best. Like I had a very friendly exit and I'm very grateful for my 10 years with them. But at the same time, I'm also very happy to be with Naked now.
Excellent. Thank you. I think that's really interesting on a point you touched on about almost them letting you make mistakes. You can learn from it so much more as if you had that fear of, if I get this wrong, it could go really wrong, which I think is a big aspect in a number of people's careers. At some point, you might have had the opposite and they may have said, right, thank you very much, but that mistake cannot happen. So unfortunately, we're parting ways, whereas actually you'll take that, learn and hopefully improve in the future. Are all these challenges or learnings that you've overcome, have they really helped you then take it from role to role, and particularly like the role you're in now at Naked, that you almost give the management team or others in the workplace a bit more freedom to express themselves and come up with different ideas?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, if I look at how I led when I had my first team, right, and this was 15 years ago, at least, right? And back then I was working in a big organization, very mature, a lot of established processes. I had done the jobs of almost every person, every role reporting into me, right? So I was very comfortable telling people not only what to do, but how to do it, right? And I mean, it's not that I wasn't open to new ideas, but I certainly didn't encourage that. It was only when I moved to retail and then to e-commerce and direct to consumer that I had teams of experts reporting into me with me having absolutely no experience as to what they were doing. So I had to get comfortable with saying, I don't know, right? That wasn't my experience in the big corporation, right? Like in the big corporation, you usually at the very least think you have all the answers, right? In that setting, it was very clear that I didn't have them. So I had to push decision making down, and I was fearful of doing that, right? But in reality, that worked very, very well, right? So I started exploring and testing how far I could take that delegation, not only of activities, but of responsibility, right? And I think that if I look now where we are at Naked, that's the right approach, because we have great people in this company. And in the past year, we've brought in very, very high caliber individuals with very deep knowledge in their specific fields. So yeah, it'd be quite stupid to go through the effort to bring them in and then have them do what I would do, right? Instead, it's like, okay, like this is a strategy. We need to be very much aligned in terms of where we're heading. So we define the what, but then each team, each function should be free to define the how. So I think that's the right setup for a company of this size to move quickly at scale.
And Maza, how do you think about the interaction of that with accountability and in sort of high stakes, high performance businesses? How do you hold your teams accountable when you, as you say, you don't have the deep subject knowledge to in some respects, I guess, know if they've made a mistake or not. But if the what doesn't materialize, how do you think about that, especially drawing on your own experience, as you said, where AB InBev mistakes weren't celebrated, but you certainly weren't, it doesn't seem, penalized for making them?
Yeah. And I just want to make it clear, right? Like that was my experience. Know of people that had a quite opposite experience and that didn't get second chances.
I'm just glad you made all your mistakes there.
Yeah, well, until now, right? No, but it's a great question, Jack. And something I go back to is the thinking at the time you make decisions, right? And I think it's probably you and me have spoken about this at some point, but there's a book that I loved called Thinking in Bets by a poker player called Annie Duke. And that was the first time I heard this concept of resulting, right? And that's evaluating decisions based on the outcomes they produce instead of evaluating them by the quality of the decision at the time it was made. So I think that's the right approach, right? Like if anyone in the team is going to make a decision, okay, have you thought about the consequences of that decision? What the impact of the decision not turning out as you'd like would be? Do you have an incremental approach? Can you start small and then scale the decision as you gather data that proves that you're on the right track, right? As you can, and sometimes you can't, right? But I think it's people need to be very accountable for that, right? So if you make a decision that goes wrong because your thinking didn't meet like the standards required by a senior leader of the business, that's a problem. And that might even be a problem when results go well, right? Because you might have just gotten lucky, right? And we cannot build a business around luck. So I think that's the moment where I try to hold people most accountable. And then if your thinking was correct and the decision didn't work out, I'm willing to stand by my team, right? And defend why that was a choice. And okay, it didn't work out, but we learned, right? And in the future, like we're going to make other mistakes, but that's a mistake that we shouldn't make again. So I don't usually get angry at mistakes unless it's a stupid mistake, right? Mistake that we could have avoided, but didn't. Like that pisses me off.
And have you found, and has it been a challenge to instill that, you might call it, show your working decision making? I mean, do you have a way of, I kind of know the answer to this, but I'll ask for the purpose of the podcast. But do we have a way of using memos or a similar tool in order to encourage people to set out their thinking from a first principles basis?
Yeah, listen, memos is a great tool. We started using memos a year ago. It takes time to get that right. I think even even Jeff Bezos, I think, said like writing a good memo is challenging, and there's an art component to it, right? So it is quite hard, and especially to do that at an organizational level, it's a big endeavor. 12 months later, I think now we're in a clearly better place, right? Where the memos are higher quality, they're much clearer, they present the hypotheses and then the reasons to believe why the hypothesis would prove to be true or false, depending on the case. I think when we started, it was very much, the memo was a tool to report, right? It was a reporting mechanism. And we are now getting to a point where the memo is a driver, an enabler of good discussions, right? So that's also like a cultural transformation, right? Like decision making at Naked used to be very concentrated at the top, right? So as we push decision making down, the point of a meeting is not only to report. I mean, some reporting needs to take place, right? But it shouldn't be only to report. It should be focused on getting quality inputs from the people in the room, right? That can complement your thinking. Having those people identify blind spots that you might be ignoring. Having the leadership remove roadblocks for you, right? Allocate resources to you, right? Like, I don't know, but it shouldn't be so focused on the past. It should be more focused on what's coming, right? And how do we enable the best future outcome? Which again, it's easy to say in an interview, right? But in reality, like, it takes time, and you have to go against muscle memory, right? Like in many cases, and that doesn't happen in a month or in a quarter, right? It takes time. I think we are now on month 15 of our journey, and while I think we're in a much better place, I still think there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think we're energized by that, not frustrated by it.
Thank you.
Just to take you back slightly from your current role, one thing I was very keen on talking to you about, given I purchased one, so you were probably somebody who lured in to get the perfect draft and put a few barrels of beer in there. So first of all, thank you for that. But secondly, just on that, going from AB InBev you touched on before and moving or relocating to Europe, how did you find that? Because it's a big ask, not only to move countries, but also continents. You've got the language barrier, the culture barrier. So how did you come across that? Did you find that quite easy with the family, or was that probably one of your biggest challenges?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, it was personally challenging, right? Because as you said, we moved from Mexico to Belgium. We have absolutely no connection to Belgium, right? Like no family backgrounds. We don't speak the language. We weren't familiar with the culture. So yeah, it's certainly a scary thought to move halfway across the world with two very small kids. My daughter was 4 and my son was 2 at the time. So it's a scary idea. However, I did think that professionally, I needed that challenge. I felt like I was in a point in my career in LATAM where I wasn't learning at the speed that I had learned before. I wouldn't say I was stuck, but I was starting to get scared of becoming stuck. So when the opportunity came my way, I thought like this could be very good professionally. And also, I don't like to say this, right? Because I always feel like I'm bad-mouthing my country, and I'm very proud of my country in many ways. But since my daughter was born, I also became quite anxious about the security challenges that my country faces, right? So that was also a driver for me and for my wife to evaluate, like, yes, this is a big risk we're taking, but it's worth taking at the end of the day. So we did it. When we got to Belgium, things were much easier than we had imagined. So as I said, my family is European. I have a European passport. So getting set was literally, it took us, I don't know, 2 weeks. People were super, super nice. We lived in Belgium. Our neighbors went out of their way to make sure that we were. Brussels, Belgium is a very nice country. So yeah, everything turned out to be much easier than we had made it up to be in our minds. Now, there are things that are always challenging, right? So the food, man, That's very challenging. For me, it's super challenging to this day, right? The weather, our first winter, I tell this, and this is absolutely true. Like one day that my son's teacher told us, like, you need to go to the supermarket to get a lamp that sends like a UV rays because your son is getting depressed, right? Because it's been 3 months since the sun has come out, right? So things that obviously in Mexico you would never even think about, right? Like, so there are parts that are quite challenging, but overall I think we found our footing quite quickly, and 3 years into our European journey, I think we're very happy. We certainly don't regret it. The move to the UK, surprisingly, we thought like, man, we moved from Mexico City to Brussels. How hard will it be to move from Brussels to Cambridge? We live in Cambridge. Surprisingly, that turned out to be much tougher because of Brexit. Yeah, sometimes you think it's going to be hard. Sometimes you think it's going to be easy, and it's the other way around. But now we're very happy here in the UK. My kids love their school. I have nothing but great things to say about your education system. Again, the people are really nice, welcoming. The food, I don't know, except for the pubs. The pubs, I'm a big fan of UK pubs.
Love Sunday lunches, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, I love the Sunday roast.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And just for your awareness as well, Maza, Jack has a UV lamp for his plants. So he likes to ensure that he's on top of those.
I do. And I use it to wake myself up in the morning as well, a la Andrew Huberman, because I'm that guy. So yeah. Okay, thanks,
In Mexico,
Maza.
we don't have those.
You don't need that. No. Yeah. Well, thanks, Maza. Let's talk a little bit about Naked Wines, the reason really that you're our first guest and we're having this conversation. When you joined, the business was very much in a state of flux. We had a number of significant challenges that we were facing, challenges on growth and challenges on liquidity, and a balance sheet that was still heavily burdened by some decisions that were made during COVID. How was the first few months now when you look back on it? And what have you taken from that you now apply when you're thinking about the future of the business?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, well, first of all, right? Like no one tricked me, right? Like no one lied to me about the challenges when I joined Naked as the UK MD or when I took over the CEO role, right? Like I knew where the company was. Even before joining, right? Like I could see the value that Naked delivers to our angels at scale. And I thought that if we can just get the company through these liquidity challenges in the next few months, we're going to be in a position where we can go back to the ethos, right? Like go back to the things that make Naked special. That was very optimistic in some ways. Right? It wasn't a matter of 2 or 3 months. It actually took, most of last year, right? To get the company to a truly stable position, to go through a lot of tests and find out what actually worked and what had worked at some point, but didn't anymore, right? And find the elements that we could then bring together into a strategy of how to move forward, right? And that's what happened at the end of the year, literally the last few days of March. So when I look back to the end of 2023 and then everything that happened until the last days of March, I split it in my head in 3 chapters, right? The first chapter was liquidity. Let's find the right banking facility for this business. Let's secure the financial foundation. Right. So yes, we were doing many things, but it was all about keeping that front and center. Once we did that, the second was, okay, can we grow the business? Right. And I think we quite quickly realized that we weren't going to grow Naked the way it had grown in the past, that we needed a new approach. So that next chapter was, okay, how do we find the right levers to pull? And then the last few months was all about like, okay, how do we bring them together into a plan that is based on common sense, right? And that doesn't require anyone starting with our board, but then our shareholders and potential investors to take big leaps of faith, right? And I think that's what we presented, right? I think our strategy, our plan is conservative in many ways, but I think that was the right approach for Naked after years of being caught in this cycle of over-promising and under-delivering, this was the right message to share both internally and externally. And I think that the narrative, both inside the company and outside of the company, has started to change since there. So sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but that's how I structure my time at Naked since joining.
That's really helpful. And my way of, when I think back over the last year and a bit, as you know, I like to think in decision trees. And when you joined in the business, we had a very tall decision tree, and there was some low probability but possible very, very severe outcomes for the business at that point. And I think the real success that we've had over the last 12 to 15 months, culminating in March and then into the new year, has been, I think, narrowing down the range of outcomes that the business faces, and really focusing on creating value for all stakeholders, for shareholders and for employees and for winemakers. And I think now, that decision tree looks a lot better than it did 15 months ago. I'll publicly thank you for that on behalf of myself and lots of other people involved in the company.
No, I thank you as well. This is a team sport, clearly.
I just had one last question before we go into the first ever quickfire section. This is probably leading into it anyway. What advice would you provide to a young Rodrigo Maza starting over again at Modelo?
I guess it would be something like learn to enjoy the present more. I'm always thinking about the future, like the different scenarios, as Jack was mentioning, how we should be preparing for them, how we're already late. It's high anxiety. So I would advise my younger self to learn how to chill, basically, to take a moment to recognize the progress that he's making, even when the results were not always there. Progress is taking place, right? So to be able to recognize that progress, and also to learn to be more grateful for all his many, many blessings. So that would be my advice. I'm trying today, right? To this day, to get better at it, but I still struggle.
I think that is very good and will resonate with a lot of listeners. Definitely me individually. I'm always, right, what can we do next? You never really take stock and think about what you're doing or how far you potentially come. So no, that's very good. Thank you.
No, I think that's I agree. It's a very common amongst certain types of personalities. I think it's a very common piece of advice that a lot of people could heed, say, myself included. Thanks, Maza.
Thank you. Now, should we get to the quickfire section? I'd love to have a really cool jingle coming into this, but we don't. So well, let's just get into it. So if you need to explain anything on top of your answer, then that's absolutely fine. They're obviously meant to be quickfire, but we're not precious here. Okay. So do you prefer to cook or get a takeaway?
I'm a terrible cook, so takeaway.
Excellent. Something we have in common. Favorite holiday destination?
Depends on the holiday. If it's a beach, Acapulco in Mexico. If it's a mountain, Whistler in Canada. And if it's a city, Rome. You can't beat Rome.
Tick.
Very good.
Full marks, Maza.
Favorite film?
I'm going to cheat and I'm going to say 3. So Gladiator, The Godfather Part 2, and There Will Be Blood.
Yeah. Common theme there. There's a lot going on in each one.
Yeah.
Favorite book?
You can't say Thinking in Bets.
No, I love that book, but I think my favorite book is The Most Important Thing by Howard Marks. And like people think that's a finance book, but I actually think it's a philosophy book, a great guide to making better decisions. So that's probably my favorite. And a book that I've been recommending a lot recently is the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. It's a great read. If you haven't read it, I'd recommend it.
Thanks. That's good. I love The Most Important Thing as well. I think it's not really a finance book, is it? Cycles happen in all sorts of parts of life, and his piece of advice of can't know where you're going, but you can know where you've been, and you can think about where you are, because it's great. And Naval Ravikant, I've not read that. Have you read that? No, but I'm very familiar with him from Twitter. I've probably read it in 160 characters.
Exactly. The book is a consolidation of his tweet storms and his interviews, but I think like that guy is like a modern day philosopher, and a lot of good principles to keep front and center.
Excellent. Okay. If you could work in one other industry, what would that be?
I mean, I think sports, but that's because I'm a massive sports fan, right? But probably not an obvious answer. But as I mentioned before, I never felt that school worked for me, right? Like it never clicked. And I think that the way education works is gonna be very, very different from now on, based on everything that's happening with AI. So I'd like to be a part of that. I'd like to help bring that to life and hopefully make school a better experience for kids like me.
Oh, I really like that answer. And then the last two, coffee order to go in the morning.
I do the fasting thing, so I can't do any lattes, although those would be my favorite. So my go-to is black Americano.
Nice, me and you both. Me and you both. And then last but not least, other than this podcast, obviously, what one podcast recommendation would you have?
The Knowledge Project by Shane Parrish. I think I've listened to all of them. I mean, I like several podcasts, but that's number one for sure.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Maza. That has been fantastic and very interesting for us. And we really appreciate you coming on. Really do appreciate it. So
thank you for inviting me and congrats. Interesting project. And I wish you all the best.